Hey everyone, I am your host Shivani Pande, and welcome back to the HR Club, where we host people leaders to seek from them tried and tested solutions to pressing HR challenges. Our conversation today is about something many of us relate closely to. I am talking about the challenge of scaling. Every founder dreams of scaling their business, but the real challenge lies in scaling people. After all, how does one balance speed with culture, growth with stability, so on and so forth? So today, we have a masterclass in scaling teams with Babu Vittal, a seasoned HR leader who has for nearly 3 decades helped organizations of all sizes build their dream teams. Having experienced the journey of 3 startups growing into unicorns, currently he heads the HR and people practice at RTP Global, a leading venture capital firm backing ambitious founders in bringing their ideas to reality. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Babu. Welcome.
Shivani, it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, Babu, I'm sure as I start this conversation, the first question that comes to my mind, and I'm sure this is not something you would be very new to, but when I got to learn about your experience, you've worked with organizations of all sizes at different stages. You have seen the industry evolve and grow. I would love to understand what are the top few things that come to your mind, the notable experience points when you reflect on your journey for the last 25 to 30 years, having worked with all these different companies with totally different backgrounds and stages.
I think one of the things which comes to my mind is 2012, 2013 when I moved into the startup ecosystem. The first thing changed is you move from formals to casuals. Such a liberating thing to happen in your I would say that's the most interesting thing which happened. That's one. Number two is you get to play 2 or 3 different roles working in a same organization. Right? In most organizations or in your career growth, what typically we would aspire for is when you change from one organization to the other, you think about probably changing title, a good pay hike. You also look at some role enrichment, right? So you would like to do something different from what you've done in the previous role or in the previous organization. The last 11, 12 years in the startup ecosystem has given me the luxury of doing it within the same organization. And in one organization, I played 5, 6 different roles. That's so enriching. So that's one thing which comes to my mind. And the third, which comes to my mind, top of my mind, is whatever you articulated about me in the introduction. That's been possible only because I had awesome team to work with throughout my journey with all the organizations I worked. So these are the top 3 things which comes to my mind. With this, forget about the first one. The second and third one put together, that typically helps me in managing my career so far.
It sounds amazing. Since you spoke about the team aspect, or basically the people that we surround ourselves with as we grow in our careers, I am very curious to learn that since you've been a part of almost 3 startups and grew into unicorns, and teams play a huge role when it comes to reaching milestones like those. Do you recall any unexpected moments or decisions or any team specific memories that you feel which did feel small at that point in time, but maybe turned out to be pivotal as the company reached certain milestones?
Should I think about it? Should I answer it from a team perspective, or what's the pivotal moment we are looking at?
Let's start with, first of all, although team is something I would want to learn about, because when I say a pivotal moment in context of the team, I would like to learn how did that change? How did something on the scaling aspect change from the team side of things? Basically, any practices particularly for the team had to be changed to make them shift the way they work or the way they perform, or to increase the velocity. And on the other end, secondary is something which I would like to learn. Is there something specific from the business aspect that the startup or the organization had to change to adjust into a growing phase?
Okay. See, one of the things which is a very, very clear sign is that you continue to do the same thing which you did yesterday or the last week or the last month, and all of a sudden you realize that you're doing more, right? The volume has increased and you're doing more. That realization, once you sit down on a weekly basis, you kind of realize that it looks like there is something more I'm ending up doing. That's one. Number two is there's a greater push from set of leaders with whom you work with, where they ask you to work in slightly different direction. See, all of us are super comfortable working in the way we do, get up in the morning, go to office, we know our meetings, we know what we're supposed to do, we know the people whom we are supposed to meet with, we know the reports we need to push out. Then there is this sudden change in things which happen, right? So the number of reports get added, the number of meetings get added, something starts moving in a different direction, right? This you would realize when you sit and reflect on a weekly basis. The performance reviews are annual reflection, but if you could start doing a weekly reflection, you'll suddenly see a shift in your pattern happening. One of the reasons I'm taking this route is there is another route you can take where if the shift is really happening, it's visible from the founders. But from the founders, for it to percolate to the HR person, it's 3 or 4 steps down. You don't get it immediately. You could see, you could look at signs around you in terms of what is changing. So these are the signs in which you could capture. When do you expect these signs? You expect these signs during your quarterly reviews, during after the board meetings, or you expect these signs during your annual reviews or during your company offsite. There is always a message which comes across during these times, right? So that's the shift which happens. As an individual, you have two options. One option is to just keep quiet and keep doing what you've been doing. Second option is to pause and see what just happened over the last 2-3 days. What was this meeting all about? Why is the leader's language changing? Is it the same what we heard during the last review meeting? When you start taking a note at all of these things, pivotal moments start appearing in front of you. We are not trained to look at pivotal moments. We are trained to just go, keep delivering, run the race, don't look at the results, and maybe end of the year, somebody will tell you you're worth extra 5% or 10%. That's totally different. But I think we'll have to pause during our own journey and we keep looking at our own organization's patterns and how they are changing. We'll get it. I mean, it's a matter of observing it once, twice, we'll get it.
Got it. Talking about that, does something come to your mind? So let's say if I had to understand what are these first few signs that either leadership or maybe let's say even people who are not in a leadership role, non-managers, team members, they could potentially be seeing of things falling off if certain aspects are not taken care of during this stage. What are the top few things that quickly start falling out when not acted upon during the growth phase?
I'll take an HR person's lens to it. We all live in Excel, right? Microsoft Excel is our god. We all live in Excel. When you spend more time cleaning up the Excel you're working on, you could be a recruitment partner, you could be a payroll person, you could be an HR business partner, but all of us working with our stakeholders, everything happens through the Excel sheet. And when a report is being asked from you, let's say run me a payroll for the next month and give me a projection for next 3 months. So the manager says that your business partner says that I want to see what are the potentials who may leave in the next 2-3 months time frame. Or as a TA partner, somebody says that what are the roles you're working on. The time it takes for you to do that report, right? That defines that what you have missed. If you're able to pull out that report in let's say 15, 20, 30 minutes time, which means you have not dropped the ball anywhere. The flip side to it, or an alternate way of looking at it is there is so much of work and the momentum has shifted, you're unable to keep your home clean. So the spreadsheet has gone haywire. It's not that you have not paid attention to it. It's gone haywire because the amount of workload has suddenly expanded. So that's a very, very simple way for an HR person to realize that whether the workload has increased or not. So that's number one. Number two is the number of orientations you start doing within the organization, right? Generally, if you're an HR person, you end up meeting a lot of new people joining the company. You'll end up doing tons of orientation for them joining the organization. If that has increased, and if you see more number of people sitting in the induction, if that number has increased, and if you see that anything you plan for, your capacity is always beyond what you have actually planned, the demand is always heavier than the supply. If those are the signs what you see, wherever the work which used to take you the regular amount of time, and that time is getting bombarded and you're helpless, those are very, very clear signs for an HR person to understand that we have moved into the next level and we are not ready.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. And speaking of that hyper growth and an HR person's involvement there, the first thing that comes to anybody's mind from outside the HR function is, okay, you will be helping us hire more, bring in more people into the team, which is the most obvious aspect of what anybody understands outside of HR function or what an HR does and will be contributing with. Beyond that, what could be something less obvious that you think that HR brings to scaling that's often overlooked or undervalued by the people?
It's your preparation. Unfortunately, most of us are not prepared for anything which is going to happen. We are ready for what's happening today. We're generally not ready for what's happening in this evening. We're ready for what's happening. Right. That's something which I've seen a few top-notch HR professionals who start by cultivating a few simple habits. So they generally look at their calendar previous night for the next day. So they kind of know what's going to happen for the next day. At least you do a scan to understand what's going to happen for the next day or for the next week. That gives a quiet heads up. Right? I've seen a few successful folks do that. I've tried doing it a few times, not always. It's not that I'll say that I was super prepared for everything, but your prep work for anything which is going to happen. Instead of showing off that you're an Excel expert that you could pull out from multiple sheets, but if you have something ready and handy, that's quite very useful, will not be appreciated by anyone, but that saves a lot of time for you. It may get noticed by one or two people, but nobody is going to appreciate that. So that's one thing which is going to definitely help. Second, the preparation which goes unnoticed, unfortunately, which none of us do, is letting the managers know about their team. Not many managers have an idea about how the team is, how many of them are in the team, how it is structured. For example, if somebody is going to complete a marquee years, let's say 2 years, 3 years in the organization, all of this we generally don't communicate. One look at any HRMS tool you have on a daily basis, which is the first routine, tells you a lot about how significant that day is. That's another preparation which would definitely help. Again, I've seen few do it. I've done it a few times, not many times. Those are things which generally goes unnoticed, but it puts you on the radar. It makes you more comfortable. It saves a lot of your bandwidth. The bandwidth during working hours gets completely saved if you're able to spend few hours beyond working hours and preparing yourself. And as I said, nobody notices that.
True enough. I think there are a lot of aspects that we could potentially be talking about if I dive deeper into that, where HR team's role does become imperative, the kind of things that are done. I hear it from so many people, it's tough to measure that, okay, what I've done, where is it really impacting positively? How do I show somebody what I've done? I remember very recently, I had this conversation with a fellow HR practitioner where they were in a limbo that, okay, I'm doing so many things, but I'm running coaching sessions, doing engagement programs. Now I'm running a first-time manager training program. There's so many things, great, but I want to know but these are all qualitative that I hear very often, especially in early stage, because it's not very clear what to do, what to stop doing. Do you have an advice or a suggestion that worked for you for particularly HR folks in early stage companies which are still, let's say, post Series A, when they are starting to grow and scale, which can help these HR folks evaluate, okay, what you are doing, is it really needed, or because you're hearing these buzzwords on other podcasts or on LinkedIn or other HR people say that, hey, let's do a coaching program, let's start a mentorship forum internally, and we start doing it without knowing what am I getting in return, what are my people getting? Is there a formula to evaluate that?
Actually, no formula. It's just you need to stop and ask this question for yourself, right? You want to be busy or you want to be efficient and effective? We like being busy. That's our herd. That's the way we have been brought up. And we've been told that being busy is very critical and very important, right? So if we could pause for a moment and say that, I would like to be busy, but I would not like to repeat what I've done in the past 6 months or so. I've shared it before, but I always suggest to my fellow fraternity that if you could sit down and write your profile in terms of what you have done in the last 1 year, and if that can cross more than a page, then you have done something significant. If you're not able to write beyond a page, time for you to think, what are you doing? I'm not saying you should change the company, but time for you to think, what are you doing? And maybe start re-looking at what you're prioritizing. So that's number one. Number two is we do end up bringing in a lot of young kids, young folks into our teams. Could be at an intern level, could be at a junior level. And probably we do that once we get promoted. So our title gets changed from there is a prefix or suffix added to a title. We move up the ladder. We bring one or two people into a team. That's where we start making another mistake, where we go back to the same thing which gave us success. And we generally don't let go of what we did last year. There are at least more than one person in the team. We could actually take 10-15% of our workload and give it to them. That would help them to grow. But we would really love to go back and do the same things which gave us a lot of success in last year. Try and repeat it now. I mean, a very successful old movie, if re-released, could continuously run for another 20-30 days, right? But re-released after 2 years may run for a week. Re-released after 10 years, everybody would have forgotten that. I think that's another major mistake which we end up doing. I'm not saying I've not done that. I have done that. But then I realized it pretty quick. Somebody told me this advice, right? So that's what I'm sharing. So that's another thing if we could start doing. And it's a little bit of delegation, right? So we end up telling everybody that you should delegate, but generally we don't delegate. So if we could push a little bit of delegation down the lane, and if we could start looking at what's keeping us busy, there are multiple tools available. You could start automating a lot of them, right? One big challenge is cost, but there are tools which are available free of cost. We could look at how we could automate this. So in summary, I would say you should start looking at yourself, not externally. Once that's clear, I'm sure about 20%, 20 to 30%, your plate would start looking empty. That's the time for you to think. If you don't have time to think and you have 120% of workload, it'll look beautiful today. Tomorrow it's going to be a challenge.
Thanks for that advice, though, for sure. That's definitely helpful. Something like, at least for me as a practitioner, I think if I had to implement it, it is definitely going to give a lot of visibility to my own, a lot of reflection to my own work. It's going to be helpful. I'm sure it's going to be helpful for our listeners as well. I will definitely want to talk about a few more similar challenges that come to my mind as we speak about HR people being trying to manage a setup during the scaling stage. I'll come to those. But before that, this another aspect that comes to my mind is about from the lens of founders. Now, although it's not so common to hear this, but it's not that I've never heard it with very early stage companies, certain early stage or young founders trying to experiment with the setup without having any HR function or any HR person internally, with the belief that, okay, why do we need this one more person to just manage things? It could be just from the cost perspective or in general with the philosophy. Okay, let's try this out. Another cool thing, we are not going to have an HR function. What are your thoughts on a philosophy like this one? Do you think things can go wrong if such a philosophy is adopted?
I wouldn't say it can go wrong. Something, if it works for a company, they should go ahead and try. Nobody is stopping it. We should only look at challenges, and we should only look at whether the founder would be able to give his time or her time to it. A typical founder is, in my mind, is the first product manager of the company, because the product is his or her idea. That's where the startup started. So the founder continues to play the role of a product person, and he or she is cost conscious. So they keep counting the money which is going out, which is the finance person role also they end up playing. They also, the first few sales need to happen through them. So they also play the salesperson role, right? And there are multiple hats which a founder has to wear. And of course, if they are into fundraising, then that's a different ballgame altogether. The multiple roles a founder need to play. Would the founder like to add one more role to his or her kitty? Is the first fundamental question the founder need to ask. Yeah, there could be reasons saying I'm going to be a 10 people company, 20 people company, I don't need anyone, perfectly fine. If you're willing to burn additional few hours for the sake of being cool and you think you can afford, of course, yes, the founder should be able to do it. So that's one perspective. Where the challenge would arise is that the amount of time you spend on operational and repetitive activities, if that shoots up, then your focus on what you are trying to build may take a hit. So that's number one. Number two, I also see that when somebody joins, right? I mean, let's say you joining an organization and me joining an organization, we both will have different set of demands. Some would be met, some may not be met. And somebody says that, yeah, we'll take care, you spend 3 months with us, 6 months with us, we'll take care of you through the journey. When this journey happens, there is a typical tendency for somebody to forget about what are those promises made. And all of this gets accumulated the time you complete your first year. 10 people do not join on the same day, 20 people do not join on the same day. If it's a 25 people org, they join spread across over, let's say, 6 to 8 months time frame. Just think about it, 18 months down the line, everybody completing 1+ year in the system would have 25 different needs, 20 different promises made, 15 different side conversations they had with the founder or with the leadership team, 10 different family pullovers happening on the site, 5 different bank loans running around. I was talking about this multiple challenges which could come from a people perspective. All of this can be documented, a system can solve for it. A founder who vividly remembers all of this happening in the organization would be able to solve for it. One HR person may not be able to solve all of it, but at least 30 to 40% of what I just mentioned, if one individual can take care of it, then it saves some time of the founder. Right? If you're pretty much sorted, you have a beautiful product making a lot of money, and if you're running the organization with very few people, you want to experiment without an HR person, or you have somebody who is a business person migrating into HR, anything and everything is fine. Nobody is stopping. I'm just listing out some challenges which may come through your way, and the way you want to manage it, it's completely up to you.
Fair enough. On the flip side, I'll take the liberty of asking this question on behalf of a founder friend whom I was speaking with recently. And one of the questions that came up from him was that, okay, I am convinced I want to bring in an HR person. I've never hired an HR, but maybe somebody to support with, let's say, certain coordinations internally. But now it's high time. I don't want just somebody to coordinate, but to come in, lead everything, maybe take some things off my plate, similar to what you were just sharing, that if you want to focus on the product and business growth as a founder, maybe an HR person can help you do that. So in such situations at certain stage, what can a founder look at in terms of expectations when they are bringing in their first HR? What can they look at? And especially from the point that it's not just about coordinating things, but also owning a lot of aspects from the people team side.
Okay. There's just one word, but I'll try and give you an example. One of the organizations I worked with was the first HR person to join, probably the only HR person. The company had 97, 98 employees. Yeah, 98 employees. All of them are from IITs and IIMs. There are just two people who are non-IIT, non-IIM. One is the receptionist, other one is me, right? And it was a fascinating journey. About a month or so, I went back and asked to the founder saying that, I've been asking a lot of questions. I've been coming to you for a lot of things, but you're not answering it. And you're only asking me to go back and figure it out. What should I do? I'm kind of confused in between. He said just one thing. Listen, I have tons of problems. I brought you in to solve the problem. The day you walked into the organization, I trusted you. This 100% trusted what I have on you. You should just go ahead and do things. I know you'll do a good job. That's the fundamental thing, what a founder should be looking in for. Look for better skills. There, get the person in. Give the person some runway. It's not going to be easy for an HR person to start a career or walk into an organization where there are already 30, 40 people who have some kind of relationship with the founder, or there are 200 people who have some kind of bonhomie going between them to start building in the equation. It's going to take some time. The founder need to place some trust on the individual. That's merely what the founder need to do. Hire for the skill. For 6 months, just blindly trust the person.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was in a way going to be my next question. Because once you have decided to get in a person, that another thought that I've heard from founders is, how do I ensure that this person understands my expectations? Because there are already, let's say, 20, 30, 40 people in the team. What can they do? So, okay, if I had to also share a piece of advice with this first HR hire, that once they are in, what can they do in the first 2, 3, 4, up to 6 months to learn as much as they can about the people, about how this team operates, and about especially how the founder thinks, and if I'm going to make these next few hires, or I am going to make certain people decisions, How can I align with the founder's philosophy?
Simple answer, keep your HR antenna down. It's slightly difficult for us. The moment we see something which is not correct, based on what we read, what we followed, what we heard from our fellow HR colleagues or college professors, we end up thinking that, oh no, that's not right. I have to go and change this in the organization. You're not brought in to a new organization to bring in changes from day one. You're brought in to observe. Spend as much time as you can. Try and learn more and more about the organization. If you're reporting into the founder, do go and bounce it back with the founder saying, this is what I saw. What do you think? And a situation like this, if this has happened 6 months back, what decision did you take? Do you regret the decision? Are you happy about the decision? Right? In a way, use your founder like a real life chat GPT, where you could just go chat with your founder in a very, very open, vocal manner, not confronting, but just with a clear caption that you're here to learn. Once you start doing that, right, 1, 2, 3 conversations, you'll start figuring out what's going on, right? That's number priority. Number 2 is, don't do something because you have to please somebody in the organization. That's another thing we do. We may have a style, and we would have worked in few organizations. We would have understood the style of those organizations. When you try bringing that into a new org, that's probably not going to help. So one of the things you could do, not bring in what your baggage is from the past. Just keep it open, have this dialogue going on, and that also tells the founder that you've been listening, you're looking at, you're observing, you're doing quite a lot of things. Just a word of caution, don't make too many conversations with the founders. He or she would start thinking that, boy, what is this guy doing? Have limited conversations, go pointed with your notes, prepared, talk to them, get some understanding. Over a period of time, reduce these conversations.
Okay, interesting. I think I do resonate with the points and the advice that you're sharing, because having been in that situation at some point in time, at least it feels like a validation. Okay, I did the right thing. So this is super helpful. Now, let's say once this person has spent some time in the team, the early stage phase has passed. Now it's time to go big, the growth stage coming in. When an organization is in that scaling phase, something that we have been talking about since the beginning, teams operate, or even in the way certain, let's say, programs are built internally, processes are evolved, that's a big change. A lot of change management happens. Sometimes we as HR folks might see value in introducing certain aspects. Let's say we talk about setting OKRs, for example, setting goals, which may not have been a very formal process before because it worked out well for the team, right? But now maybe it's something we should experiment with. Teams are growing. There's so many people. There are questions about, okay, who does what? Where do I draw the line? What will I be evaluated on? A lot of these key questions start coming in as the team also grows. So at this phase, when certain programs are introduced, processes are introduced, it's likely to see a pushback, not just from team members, but sometimes even from the leaders themselves or the managers themselves. What do you think, or how do you think an HR person can navigate through these? Because you can't really push everything. Maybe what if it really does not work for them? It's gonna fail. You never know. You only know once you've implemented and you have seen some results. How would you suggest to this HR person to go about it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'll just ask you. You went through the schooling system, right? The KGs, then the middle school, the senior school, college. Did you have the same teacher all throughout?
No, not at all.
Kept changing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But we think as HR professionals, when the company goes through multiple changes, we'll be one teacher who'll be able to manage all of this, right?
Yeah.
We do think that. When you come to middle school and when you look at your kindergarten teacher, we generally turn our face the other way and move out. Generally, right? I'm not saying everybody does that, but generally that's what we do. But when it comes to our career, we expect ourselves to be somebody who will be doing all of these things. So that's one understanding you should bring. You have been seen as a KG teacher. Now the org has moved to the mid-level or to the senior level or graduating towards the college. And how would they continue to see the KG teacher unless you have grown your skills? Right? So that's something fundamentally we also need to scale up. It's not just the org scale up, we also need to scale up in parallel. Only then that the kids or your employees will be able to look at you from a different lens. So that's one fundamental thing I would suggest before even moving into this question, trying to look at doing it. So that's one. Second is, I'll use the same analogy. If it's school, you have to go to school on time. Schools get your exams. Exams happen during a specific time, and final exams also happen by end of the year. When you move to next year, maybe uniform changes, maybe your school bus changes. These are changes which are necessary as you grow. As an organization grows, bringing in OKR may be necessary. Maybe you're a dispersed team. Maybe there are teams working from different locations. So you need to bring in OKR. Maybe the performance review used to happen twice a year. Now you've become so big, you want to do it once a year. Maybe compensation revision used to be paid when every individual completes their year. When you complete a year, they pay. Maybe you have to move it to once a year for everybody, not every time you complete your personal milestone. These are changes which you will end up doing when an organization is scaling up. Maybe you're using a current tool, you need to bring in a new tool. This is inevitable, right? Once you realize that you're scaling up, all of this is inevitable, and every change is going to be met with huge amount of resistance. The fundamental resistance starts from you. If you understand there's going to be resistance, much better. And with everything which is coming towards you in the organization, there are only two things you can do. One, be adamant about the resistance is coming in because of a specific reason, or two, being open about why this resistance is coming in. If you figure out why this is coming in, you can try and solve for it. If you're unable to figure out and you remain adamant, it's going to be difficult. So two things will definitely happen. One, you have to introduce all these changes because your org is growing. Two, you have to bring in all of this, and there's going to be a lot of resistance for all of this. How do you face the resistance? Let's look at your introducing OKR into the organization. Heavy pushback. There is obviously one or two employees within your org or within your team who has worked on OKRs in the previous organization. They have that experience on working on OKR. Those are your champions. Piggyback on them. They would really help you to do that. And in the process, keep appreciating everybody. Like somebody submitted on time, just make big news about it. That also puts others on shame. Don't do that. But someone completing something on time, just make big news about it. Make sure it's spoken about in management team meetings. Make sure you push a newsletter out of it, or it appears on your company notice board, whatever it is, right? Just keep pushing any small wins by others. That kind of helps you move through resistance. The difficult part is going through the first resistance you encounter. Let's say you're going to introduce in the next 3 years 5 different changes. In the first change, you got tons of resistance. Learn it, document it. Not about pinpointing people. Any resistance we know, here are the 4 troublemakers. Don't pinpoint them, right? That's just knowing. Keep it. But if you could write a small notebook or a document, you could do a Notion page. These are the 10 resistances I faced when I rolled out the first change. Next change, I'll address them before rolling out the change. The org is your playground. The founder has trusted you, right? And you are one person whom everyone looks up, which you don't know. So if you can play that playground in a more fair way, you could learn the game while you're playing the game. That's much more easier rather than going and looking at how else I could learn from elsewhere. It's always good to learn from elsewhere. I'm not denying that. But this is your playground. You know your place. And if you could start documenting your strategies from one move to the other, it becomes much easier.
Understood. That's super helpful. I would say, again, some of these, pieces of advice, or in a way, food for thought, again, for me, because any conversations I do on these sessions on the HR Club, it almost become like a one-on-one mentorship session for me as well, having spent so much time in a similar role and similar challenges. I can very well resonate with what you're sharing. With that, another aspect or challenge about scaling that comes to HR is while we are designing our HR roadmap during the scaling phase. Something that I would like to learn is, are there certain milestones which are more important than the rest when it comes to picking up what to add in an HR roadmap? For example, we talk about, okay, we are growing, we should have a formal performance management process in place, or we should have a planned list of, let's say, the engagement programs that we will have to implement. Is there any of these which is more important than the rest, or it can be different from one startup to another?
And all of this is important, right? And keeps your job busy, hectic, happy, and keeps your job safe. So we have to do all of this. Besides that, just one thing I would say is look at your org strategy. What direction are they going in? What are they trying to build in? What turns this would take? What are the milestones for the organization? When you could draw your roadmap from those milestones, that would be much more easier. Let's say if your org milestone is to 10x the revenue what they're doing today. Right? There are only a couple of questions for you to ask. You 10x by adding 10x more people, or you 10x by adding 2x more people but driving more efficiency. When you get answers for these questions, let's say the answer is 2x and not 10x is easy, adding 10x more people. 2x is challenging. If it's 2x, then your roadmap tells you for the next 8 months you'll be focusing on hiring, because they need to come on board and start delivering. If you have to wait for 8 months for somebody to deliver and your org is committed that they'll deliver 10x in next 12 months, that's going to be a challenge. So align yourself with the org strategy. You could create your playbook.
Sure, got it. One of the aspects of the same roadmap during scaling is also hiring. In startups, especially in startups, there's the philosophy of hire fast, fire fast. That does happen during the scaling stage, which can come across as controversial, of course. So, can you help us understand, based on your perspective, is there a better way to position it or make either internal team members or candidates understand the idea of this philosophy?
Wow, that's difficult. I mean, it's something which you will understand while you are within the organization and while you're rolling through. One of the things I always look for is that if you want to give somebody 3 month time period, if you say that your confirmation process is 3 months, what do you expect that person to do? You expect the person, he or she has been hired for the role, expected to do something, and they have done that something in a span of 3 months. Bingo. Confirm the individual. Don't expect anything more from the individual. If they're doing something beyond that, be happy about it. But if somebody is able to deliver based on the promises you hired the individual for the first 3 months, should not be a problem. I would slightly flip the statement. Go to the hiring manager and ask the person, can you tell me what the new hire is supposed to do for the next 24 months? If your hiring manager has that clarity, I would suggest only then you should proceed with hiring the individual, and otherwise don't hire. If you are hiring to solve for an immediate burning issue, there are other ways to hire rather than bringing in a permanent person. So the problem is both ways. One is like you, after spending as an employee after a year, you realize that I have to do only repetitive tasks, so I can probably manage work in this company for another 2-3 years, do what I've done in the first year, replicate it for the next 2 years. That's one. That problem arises fundamentally because hiring managers, most of them, are not very clear on what XYZ is supposed to do for the next 24 months. Solve it there, your hire fast, fire fast problem will be solved to a large extent.
Understood. Makes sense. And on similar lines, when we speak of hyper growth again, are there any short signs that HR people, of course, particularly, it could be in addition to HR managers as well, that we can look out for to understand when an employee's growth curve is probably no longer managing the organization's growth curve, or I should say the pace, not really the growth curve, but the pace that we can identify? Are there any specific signs for it?
I mean, if your hiring strategy is largely focused on hiring generalists, I don't think you need to worry too much. If you're bringing in more domain specific experts within your organization, the more you verticalize your org, the more you bring in domain specific individuals, then that becomes a challenge which you need to continuously look for. You should have a 5-year outlook, then you bring in a domain expert to do something today. Only then it works. Otherwise, with generalists, I don't think it will be a problem. People may outgrow their role through their competence, which is a good problem to have. People may outgrow their role through their compensation, which is not a good problem to have, which means you have done some hiring mistakes. It's a burning need. You just brought somebody in and threw a lot of money at them. So that's a problem which you should not be having. People may not grow up in the organization, but the org has already moving on in a different trajectory. That's the place where you should be looking at hire fast and letting go people fast, right? So if you start looking at your org in 2 or 3 different lenses and people in 2 or 3 different lenses, I'm just going back to the first 5-10 minute conversation where we had, where we spoke about free up 20-30% of your time. Don't be busy 100% of your time. You will have to be doing all of this when you free up, right? Because we're sitting on gold mine of data. We know an individual from the time we call them to find out whether they're interested in joining an organization till the time they are in journey with us, right? We know their competencies, we know their preferences, we know to an extent about their personal life. We have a lot of data points. There are a lot of breadcrumbs an employee leaves in their journey. It's just that we don't pick it up. All we have to do is just pick up the interview notes if it's documented. Just pick up what happened in debrief. Just look at why the manager confirmed an employee. Just look at end of the year performance reviews. You have 4 different data points about an employee's performance, expectation, performance, delivery. That can tell you if my org is taking a U-turn, whether this person will be able to do the U-turn with us or not. So we can be prepared. Spend that 20-30% extra time you get thinking about people and looking through data.
Okay, perfect. But also, how about when we speak of, let's say, early team members and when they start to struggle to adjust to the demands of a scaling organization? How do you think an org, or maybe let's say the founders, can support them without slowing down the company's growth? Because sometimes attachment is one thing because these people have been with you since the beginning. But 5 years, 6 years, 8, 10 years down the line, and it's great if they have stayed with the organization, but sometimes they can hit a roadblock where they feel that, okay, I've seen this company where we were all okay to do anything. I could come up with something, start experimenting, make it go live. But now there is so much bureaucracy, so many steps I had to take, because these are the folks who have seen that huge difference. How do you think an organization can really help them in such scenario?
The first performance review you do with your founding team. Let's call them the founding team.
Yeah.
There are founders and there are founding team. I'm assuming we are talking about the first 5-6 people who join the organization. The first performance review you have with them is the make or break. Right? If you could sit down and tell them, here are your 10 key strengths, here are your 3 strengths which you need to improve. And I'm also sure that these 3 is not your cup of tea. And this 10 is your cup of tea. Continue to leverage on this. You are a founding team member, and I'm sure you're going to be with me for 10 years or till the end of the life cycle of this company, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. And set the expectations there. You are most important to me. Help me build this organization. These 10 skills are definitely necessary. This 3 will become 5, will become 7, will become 10 over a period of time. I will bring in leaders above you. I will bring in people above you. Your title may get stagnant. You'll get a lot of people on top of you. Your job is to learn from them. I see you as a long term. Probably the leaders who are coming in after you may be long term, may not be long term. For me, you are long term. This is your report card. This is your assessment. Learn from the guys who are coming after you. You are very critical to me. And our game is a long game, not a 2 or 3 year game. If in the first performance review we set this expectation, it will not be forgotten. There will not be these issues. I don't think the founding team is looking for, give me from a manager, make me senior manager. No, that's not they're looking for. They probably had a lot of love and affection and personal time with the founders at the beginning. That's another expectation you can set. I will start traveling a little far away from you over the next few years time frame, but I know you. Right? If we can set this personal and professional expectations at the beginning, very difficult to do, because end of first year, maybe from 5 you have gone to 40, you want to go to 5,000, you still need this 5 people until you hit, let's say, a 500 number, right? You still need them. It's a difficult conversation to have. But with all openness and honesty, if you could have this conversation, nothing like it.
Makes sense. Speaking of founding team, those are also the bunch of folks that lay the foundation of the culture of the organization in the growing years. What starts there, eventually it grows. At the same time, culture is also often one of the first casualties that happen during hypergrowth. Have you observed, or have you realized any specific invisible cost of scaling that comes from the culture perspective that organizations usually overlook until it's too late?
Happens all the time. Very difficult to bring the boat back to its normal course. The multiple tides which come into your organization takes you in different direction. Happens all the time. Most probably it gets resolved when you get a brutal wake-up call. And most of the times the brutal wake-up call comes with a lot of casualties. within the organization in multiple directions. Happens a lot of times, right? There is this program called induction, which we all do. And if you go back and ask our fraternity in terms of what we cover in induction, we'll talk about the organization, we'll talk about the number of people in the organization. We may not go beyond that. That's a place for you to talk about culture. If you can start talking about culture, because in every leader orientation, if we can start talking about this is our culture, this is the way we operate, these are few things which we have done in the past. If you could do that, that kind of helps you to keep your culture intact. You also need to take a call that it's not going to be 100% intact. Probably 30-40% it will remain intact. What is that 30-40%? I'll be an ethical organization. I'll be a first principles thinking organization. I'll probably be someone who will do everything on time. So you could lay out few principles around that, and that is something you can try and preserve, not more than that.
Okay. And as a part of culture itself, I mean, a lot of organizations in early phase, it's a little easier for them to balance people's well-being and the business needs as well, because fewer people, fewer processes. But again, at the time of scaling, that can take a hit because there is hyper growth. Now you are in a phase where you have to push people, really. How does one find a balance? Basically, the founders or the HR people, how can they help in finding a balance when it comes to people's well-being and the business needs clash?
I mean, what's well-being? Ask that fundamental question. If you're talking about managing working hours, managing workload, physical well-being, taking care of somebody's health, yeah, that has to be taken care of. Fundamentally, you need to ask this question on why people joining my organization. Because they love the work they do. They love the kind of work we do. That's why they're joining the organization. So if you could frequently check up on the quantum of interesting work they do and the quantum of boring work they do, that balance will tell you whether people wellness is taken care of or not. If the quantum of boring work is increasing, it takes a hit on wellness. If the quantum of interesting work continues, the wellness portion is not touched upon, right? Which is when the work has become more interesting, that's when HR need to intervene and fix the wellness piece. You should not be intervening when the work is becoming more boring, because at that point in time, any wellness intervention you bring in is not going to stick around. The company, the employees would be looking for more and more new interventions to happen. You'll be exhausted. There are only so much of wellness you could bring into the organization, so much of processes you could build in. You cannot keep bending the organization. So probably you should time your wellness interventions at the right time. Probably you should also start working with business to ensure that most things we do are innovative, are moving in the right direction, and work is interesting. If work is interesting, focus on wellness would be less. When the focus is less, that's a good time for you to build a very solid wellness program within your organization. Don't do it when work is boring or when the business is down.
Got it. And another popular question that comes in addition to that is about how to keep the startup spirit alive at this stage. Are there any best practices that you have implemented or come across that you think are not too cliche, or I'm not sure if there is a way to not make them cliche, but that work well in these situations?
You're talking about the wellness programs in the startup space, or
no, outside of it, just to keep the startup spirit alive during the scaling phase.
Okay, so there are a few things which you could do. One of the things is do not mimic what the other organization is doing. Once you start mimicking, then you'll have to go outings on and every alternate week, right? That's not going to help. If that is what a cool startup means, right? Because social media tells you what a cool startup is. In my mind, if I am an employee, I would like to know about my organization from my founder. I don't want to know about my organization from a newspaper or something getting posted on Facebook or Insta, right? If that amount of transparency is happening, then that's the most coolest stuff which could happen in an organization, in a startup, right? Beyond that, everything is a checklist. Do an outing, going out for lunch, movie, whatever it is, right? Each of us have a formula. We would like to follow that formula. That's a perfect formula to follow. But the most important thing for me is transparency. If I can hear everything about my organization through my founder, that's the coolest stuff that can happen for me in my startup.
Okay. And since you spoke about not to make the mistake of mimicking other organizations, because to each their own. Something that worked for them might not work for you, and vice versa. Is there a popular scaling practice that you think is overrated or rather harmful that you see many organizations adopt during their scaling phase, but doesn't do much good for them?
I mean, different organizations do it differently, and most of us end up doing the mistake of overhiring or sending the message to the world that we are hiring. So that's a common mistake which most of us make. That's one place where we can be clear of. The other thing, what I've seen is, at least worked in one organization, is we listed out all things we could do with the moment we got funding, and had a town hall, asked our employees, these are the top 3 things we can do because we got more funding. And the fourth one we could do is probably give you more money during performance reviews. Which one do you prefer? Right? Most employees choose the fourth option in first year. In second year, the option chosen was different, right? The reason I'm sharing this is because it's better to go back and put it to the employees and say that, or to, let's say, to your engineering or to your CTO, and tell them that this is what I've seen the last 5 companies do during scaling phase, and all of this is last 6 months. We have to wait for next 3 years to know whether all the strategies worked or not. There's one way we could mimic them, and other way is tell me what we can do without replicating anyone what they are doing. If we could find something in between and solve for it, that's probably the best strategy, right? Our challenge is that we are influenced by so many things which is floating around us, so we really want to just go ahead, pick that up and do. Like in the last 2 years back, not now, 2 years back, everyone did hackathon, right? Not too sure why everybody did hackathon. Just because somebody did, it looked so cool, everybody did it. That's an indication of scaling up. It's an indication that we are also desperate in the market. That's an indication that I also, when I build my brand inside few campuses, it sends out a lot of signals. But do you really need to do it? So you just need to ask questions in terms of what suits me and what baggage I'm not carrying from my previous organization, what scale up mistakes I'm not learning from outside. If you do that, you can kind of put together your own scale up strategy. The reason I'm not advising or advocating one specific strategy is because across 6-7 organizations I've seen, 6-7 different things have worked. I haven't seen one common thing which is working or which is broken across all 7 of them, just because they adopted something different.
Okay. Babu, from your own experience, because you have yourself been a part of teams and scaled them, established processes, do you have any one reference for a hardest scaling phase that you would have experienced particularly, and how did you navigate it personally?
See, the hardest scaling phase is that when you see the funding news of your own organization coming out in the newspaper. The funniest thing is I've seen, including myself, right? Let's take an arbitrary example. Real, but I'm not taking the real numbers.
Sure.
The company raised, say, 100 million, and there are employees, including me. The first thing what we would calculate is 100 divided by 100 and say that each of us will get $1 million. I don't think employees are so irrational today, but there is this scaling up. Biggest expectation is when the funding news is out or when you know funding is going to happen, that immediately most of us think that it translates into our own salary, which is not right. I mean, that realization does not happen when the news is out. The immediate performance review process is a nightmare to do. Expectation mismatch, sometimes high attrition. So most things happen during that. That's the biggest scaling up challenge I have seen. Apart, so there are business challenges, there are HR challenges. By now, most of us have mastered, or we know the right person to go and get help from. But this is one thing, it's not been solved for so far.
Got it. Perfectly makes sense. Now, as we move towards the end of this conversation, I have 2 questions on my mind that I would love to hear from you. Do you have a memory of any one mistake that you feel that you probably made in the early days of scaling of any of the organizations or in your career in the early stage that actually shaped you as a leader, the learnings from which shaped you as a leader?
There are hundreds of them, right? There's not just one mistake. I still remember in one of the interviews, somebody told me that you sound bookish. That's a personal learning for me. From that point in time, probably through the last hour or so, you would have realized that you don't get to hear many strategic utterances or words from me, and I try to keep it more practical. That's a learning which I had very, very early in my career when somebody said that you're bookish. So I do learn, but I kept books and references away from all my learning. So that's one. Another interesting learning what I had is about the first conversation within joining with the founder. He asked me, tell me about how the organization is doing. I'm like, no, I've joined to manage a vertical. I know nothing about the organization, which I didn't say, but I just gave him a few things. A week later, fully prepared on the organization, went to my one-on-one with the founder and he says, okay, tell me what's happening in our vertical. I'm like, why? Last week you asked me a different question. Now you're asking me a different question, right? That's a phenomenal learning what I had after first 2 weeks, that the founder is expecting to know my understanding of the business and the organization. That's probably the moment where I started looking at and speaking more about org than less about people. That's a learning which kind of hit me very, very hard. I could still recollect those 2 weeks, right? The first week question and sleepless nights, the second week question. I have to wait for the third week to kind of get into realization in terms of what actually is happening. Third one, what I realized was that, so this is post an acquisition. I didn't figure out what systems we're going to follow. I was running parallel on two systems. So we acquired an organization. We had an existing practice. I was running on those existing practices. The acquired company had a different set of practice and they were running on those set of practices. We were expected to marry both of them together. It took a while for me to understand why we are supposed to have both together, right? System integration is something which I failed miserably to start with. And that's when I kind of realized that what unique ID brings in a difference, what employee experience brings in a difference. When an employee walks into an organization post acquisition, how do you need to quickly ensure that he or she forgets about the past and looks at this as a new organization? My mistake ensured the org continued in this dilemma for the next 6 months. So that's something which I'm not going to forget for a long, long time.
Thank you for candidly sharing that. Super helpful. And moving to the last question of this chat, you have personally observed the ways of working change, the industries evolve. So, with all the technological evolution, with the workplace expectations shifting, what do you think that could be a biggest challenge for scaling startups over the next few years, let's say? Is there a big opportunity that you feel most are not really ready for and might have to work harder towards?
Yeah. In my mind, we're gonna get a lot of people who knew a lot of things and whose understanding is not beyond headlines, right? We're gonna have all this efficiency enhancement online tools, which is gonna give you more information about a few things, and you will also end up gathering just few information about those things, right? Let's say model context protocol is something which is coming up. People keep talking about it, right? What's my understanding on MCP? Very little. In a management conversation, if somebody brings up MCP, I'll say, yeah, I know about it. So, but I have no clue about it. I have all the facility. If somebody is asking me the second question, open up quickly my internet and all those tools and figure out all those GPT tools and figure out even more in-depth answer. But again, I'm answering what I see there. There is less amount of depth I have gone into. Right? Maybe moving forward, my worst fear is that we'll have relatively more professionals with less depth. So interviews will be cracked very easily. And when you throw them at work, that's where the challenge begins. Applies to everyone, applies largely to HR professionals also.
Thank you for sharing that. With this, we reach the end of our conversation. I wholeheartedly thank you, Babu, for taking our time today. I know there was a plethora of questions varying around different topics around scaling. And because, again, it is such a wide theme to speak about, because the moment scaling comes into the picture, from the org structure to practices to culture, it basically affects each and everything. So thank you for being patient, seeing everything. This was certainly a really insightful conversation for me, and I am certain this has been so for our listeners as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of interacting and brilliant questions. Most of it I haven't thought about, but thanks for helping me reflect.
Thank you.
Thank you.